Nightly News. It's yours truly, Maria Leonard, here to teach and entertain you. Today, I am accompanied by 3 experts in their field to talk about an important issue that has affected all of us for the last 10 years, xenophobia. The 1920s was not an accepting time. Since 1890, the U.S. was having an overwhelming amount of immigrants coming in, and by the 20s, the U.S. drew a line. Americans began to resent and fear these new people and thought that somehow they could cause them harm. Also, the world saw how communism took over Russia, and Americans feared that their way of life could change. With all these ill feelings Americans had for newcomers, Congress passed laws banning people from entering the U.S. In this segment of the Nightly News, we will go in depth of the racism of the 20s. Now to Allison with statistics.
Thanks, Maria. Glad to be here. Beginning in 1890, the United States experienced a massive influx of immigrants from around the world. Staggering numbers of men, women, and children came from Europe, Asia, Mexico, Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, and elsewhere, searching for a new start and a brighter future. In 20 years, 1/10 of the adult Mexican population immigrated across the border, hoping to escape the political and economic turmoil they faced in Mexico. In 1920 to 1921, 800,000 people entered the country, leading the United States to limit their number of immigrants allowed. Asians were a large population of the immigrants, causing the government to pass the Oriental Exclusion Act of 1924. This limited almost all Asian immigration, including foreign-born wives and American-born children of immigrants. In 1924, the number of immigrants was limited to 164,000 annually, decreasing the number by 2% each year. The post-World War I had a great effect on immigration laws put into place in the 1920s. After the war, many discovered that the economy could survive without immigrants. Some wanted to limit immigration because it was changing American culture, while most saw it economically beneficial to limit immigration. This still exists today. Back to you, Maria.
Thank you, Allison. Now we will go on to the Red Scare, but first, a commercial break.
Starting this Friday, come and see Bolshevism on Trial, a new and revolutionary film directed by Harry Knowles from the Mayflower Photoplay Company. Barbara, a wealthy socialite influenced by Herman, a social agitator, wants to reform capitalism to socialism. She converts her boyfriend Norman with her socialist ideas, and they buy an island off of Florida called Paradise Island to create a colony. After they get to the island, she realizes that no one has any worthwhile skill. Chaos erupts, and the original leader, Norman, is replaced by Herman. Herman establishes absolute rule and imprisons Norman. Norman's father then comes in an attempt to rescue them and restore the American flag to an island overturned by communism, saluting to a red flag. Come this Friday to see whether he is successful. This weekend alone, watch the flags in your town. You may notice some of them have been replaced and are now red. Well, our American heroes are coming to fix that problem and restore the true symbol of America, our flag.
And we're back, and now to the Red Scare with Xin Wen.
The Red Scare, occurring between November 1918 to mid-1920, was a time of unrest and national hysteria. After the world witnessed the Bolsheviks' revolution in Russia, there was a widespread fear of a communist revolution in America, Bolshevism and anarchism. Furthermore, this was a time of economical and workers' unrest. War industries closed, leaving unemployment throughout the nation, and thus labor strikes, protest movements, and challenges to social orders were blamed on the communists and radicals. To inhibit the development of a revolution, the American Legion was formed to defend the Constitution of America, and the General Intelligence Division of Bureau of Investigation was started by General A. Mitchell Palmer and headed by J. Edgar Hoover to uncover Bolshevik conspiracy and stop it. Threats of revolution include the Seattle General Strike in February of 1919, both bombing campaigns in April and June 1919, and the Boston Police Strike September 1919, and the Steel Workers Strike also September 1919. In the Seattle Shipyard General Strike, 60,000 workers struck on February 6. The strikers were falsely labeled as red, attempting to incite a revolution regardless of the fact that no actual violence took place. Local hysteria increased, and the strike was put down on February 10th by Seattle's Mayor Old Hanson. In the preceding 6 months, All strikes were considered crime against society, conspiracy against government, or plot to establish communism. The strike eventually led to a widespread red hunting, where people accused others of association with the Reds. The American Legion was then formed to take over the issues with the Reds. Then in April 1919, around 30 bombs were discovered to be targeted at prominent politicians, including Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer. However, this plotting failed as bombs were discovered undelivered or blown up too early. Later, in June, 8 larger bombs were mailed to oppressors of anarchist radicals. Palmer once again was mailed a bomb, but luckily for Palmer, the bomb blew up too early, killing the radical delivering it. This incident caused Palmer to initiate the General Intelligence Division of Bureau of Investigation and begin the Palmer raids. Supposed radicals were imprisoned and deported, oftentimes against civil liberties, since the information was from unwarranted wiretapes and undercover informants. The Red Scare ended after May Day of 1920, when Palmer's predictions of radicals overturning the government failed. Palmer and Hoover both told the nation to expect the worst of assassinations, bombing, and general strike, which caused the nation to plunge into chaos. Police were mobilizing militias, and people were buying all they could to protect themselves of the attack. However, May Day passed and nothing happened. Thus, after this incident, anti-Bolshevism decreased dramatically. Later in May, did prominent attorneys including Dean Pound, Zachary Caffey, Felix Frankenfurter issue a report of violations of civil liberties of the Palmer raids.
Thanks for that information on the Red Scare. Now I will be discussing the government's part in xenophobia. The United States government has mirrored the hostile views of its people and increased the issue of xenophobia. Throughout the 1920s, various laws and acts were passed to make it more difficult for immigrants to enter the country and thrive as a resident. Citizens feared that immigrants would take natural-born citizens' jobs and spread radical ideologies. The government responded to this trepidation by passing an emergency restriction bill in 1921 to limit immigration using a quota system. In 1921, from any country, only 3% of the number of people from that country already living in the United States could be admitted. In 1924, Congress passed the Natural Origins Act, which lowered the quota to 2% and lowered the base year to 1890, when the immigration population was much smaller. The restrictions were meant to bar undesirable immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe and especially Asian countries. United States officials suspended the rights of citizens in their discriminatory action. In 1920, Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, convinced that Russian immigrants were planning a communist revolution in the United States, arrested 6,000 people and held them without trial, suspending their constitutional right of habeas corpus. Palmer found no conclusive evidence suggesting the revolution, but continued to hold many of the suspects and stimulate the Red Scare. Despite the constant antagonism of the government and people of the United States, immigrants proceeded to come and enrich the American society, creating the thriving and diverse culture we celebrate today. Thanks, and back to you, Maria.
Thank you for joining us on this segment of the Nightly News. Please join us again tomorrow night for the future of the 1930s.